The FTC strikes again. For the very first time in the FTC's history, it's about reviews hacking. We're in the news, and there's never a dull moment when it comes to Amazon and Amazon sellers. The FTC restocks its coffers with $600,000 in fees to use towards later enforcement, this time from the Bountiful company, a maker of supplements and vitamins. Welcome to the Day 2 podcast. Today's topic: things you may not have realized were illegal, but are. Review hacking is one of them. I'm Jason Boyce, founder and CEO of Avenue 7 Media and host of the Day 2 podcast. And with me today is my friend and colleague, Shannon Roddy. Shannon, you were out sick last week. I'm going to blame you for not getting one in the can.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm glad you're back from the dead. How you feeling?
I'm feeling a little bit better. I've got that sort of rough voice, slightly deeper voice. So I'm not going to do Barry Manilow today, but I think people can catch stuff through Zoom now because everybody's working remotely and yet everybody's getting sick. It's ridiculous. So who knows? Maybe there's a new app that you can do to, virus protection over Zoom, but whatever.
It's funny. I was talking to a client yesterday, and I was saying in our organization, we've got over 100 workers. It feels like we all are in the same office because I think we've got half a dozen people that have COVID right now, as if they were sharing it, and they're all on different continents. So it is very strange. This thing has definitely not gone away. But for Shannon, today, a couple of news stories caught my eye, but I really want to focus on this FTC thing because I think that a lot of sellers have done this. So what happened? So the Bountiful company, which is a very big supplements maker, and by the way, supplements category on Amazon, one of the most competitive, one of the nastiest, one of the most challenging categories of all. The other category that popped into my head was like, what's the powder?
Collagen.
Thank you. Yes. I was thinking to myself, what's the bigger category that's nastier? And I thought of another supplement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And what did the Bountiful company do? Something that I would say would be considered usual practice, which is you have a listing that has done really, really well on Amazon. You've gotten rank, you've got Amazon's Choice, you got bestseller badge because you sold a whole bunch of it. And then you want to introduce a new product that's very similar to the one that you listed in the first place and had great success with. And instead of creating a brand new listing with a new ASIN, you just variate an existing high-performing listing with another variation. Now, the Bountiful company did this. And in fact, Shannon, I'm going to read just a couple quick paragraphs here. Exactly.
Yeah, please do.
This particular source is Nutra Ingredients USA, is the online news agency that I got this story from, and they're very snapped into the supplement space. But here's just a couple of paragraphs real quick. According to the FTC, the Bountiful company, best known for its Nature's Bounty and Sundown brands, allegedly deceived consumers into thinking that its newly introduced supplements had more product ratings and reviews, higher average ratings, and #1 bestseller and Amazon Choice badges. Boosting your products by hijacking another product's ratings or reviews is a relatively new tactic, not so sure about that, but is still plain old false advertising, said Samuel Levine, director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection. The Bountiful company is paying back $600,000 for manipulating product pages and deceiving consumers. Shannon, you've been a consultant for a long time, decade. You ever make a recommendation to a brand to variate a product? Be honest.
Yeah, I want to tear into this one. One of the companies that I worked with several years ago they had a hand broom, a little hand broom, and the #1 bestseller that we were competing with had 3 variations: a hand broom and some sort of kitchen scrubber, and I kid you not, a toilet plunger, all as part of the same variation. And we're trying to compete against, it's like, how can we compete against these guys? They've got thousands of listings. And so have I ever encouraged clients to variate products? Yes, 100%, absolutely, right? Because, and this is where it'll be really interesting because I really want to tear this one apart. Let's talk for a second about what a variation is, and then what Amazon considers legitimate or illegitimate variations. And then it's going to be really interesting to, pull it apart even further and see, well, what does the FTC consider as a legitimate variation? If I have 3 products or a product that has 3 colors, Amazon says you can variate that under a color variation theme, provided that that variation type is available in your category. And that's something important to know because not all variation themes are available in every category. So for example, you could have a bedding category and then it allows you to, list by style, by color, by size. But then if you go over to blankets, maybe they only allow you color and size, but style is not an option in that category, even though there's very similar blankets that could have different styles. So part of it is just sort of playing by Amazon sort of made up rules of what they consider a variation. And so typically Amazon says if it's a color variation or a size variation, those are kind of the two most prominent ones. In some cases, you'd have flavor if it was a food product or, et cetera, or scent if you're talking about candles. But for the most part, those are legitimate variations. Where it gets really tricky is when you start to talk about things like multi-packs. So I've got a 1-pack and a 5-pack and a 10-pack. Amazon says only manufacturers, brand owners, not resellers, are allowed to create a variation that lists multi-packs. And that kind of makes sense. You don't want a bunch of resellers out there creating multiple variations of multi-packs. But the second you add a single element to a product that makes it a bundle, Amazon says you can't make a multi-pack variation of a bundle. So a bundle can't be part of a variation. And it sort of gets down into these very specific nuances. And so there's definitely elements where I've had clients who said, you know what, I've got a product, it has different styles. Amazon doesn't allow styles in this category. We're going to launch it under colors. And if they give us feedback or hell, we'll take it down and tear it apart. But it's really the same product, just different styles. But Amazon just doesn't offer styles in this category. So it really becomes sort of a technical issue in terms of what Amazon allows and considers for each category.
That's a great explanation, Shannon. Thank you for that. And, I was looking for a beard trimmer the other day, right? And I was on Amazon and I was looking at the different, and I was online as well, not just on Amazon, but I saw a beard trimmer and it came with a kit. It had like a brush and it had a comb and it had some kind of beard oil and all these things in it. And so what you're saying is Amazon will allow that so long as the manufacturer who created those things put it together into a package. Like you would go to a pharmacy and see a box, and inside that box would be all of those things,
right,
and it had its own UPC barcode, and you could buy it. And so that's okay. But what you're saying is if it's a reseller, you cannot do that. If a reseller comes in there and buys one thing from one manufacturer, another thing from another manufacturer, doesn't create its own box, doesn't create its own UPC code, and bundle it together, you can't variate there.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon says you can't add a bundle to a variation, period. So if it is a bundle made up of multiple UPC codes, that has to be a standalone item. But from a standpoint of a multi-pack, which Amazon considers the same exact product, but in different quantities, so a 1-pack, 3-pack, 5-pack, et cetera, then only the manufacturer is able to create that variation under typically sort of size. And this is, again, it gets really wonky because Amazon says, well, you're supposed to do it under the item package quantity, right? Which is sort of the variation theme, but that never works with the flat file templates. It's such a pain. So we just do it under size, and we say the size is a 1-pack, a 3-pack, and a 5-pack. And technically that works. So there's some discrepancy in terms of what Amazon says is okay, is not okay, how you're supposed to do it, and how people actually do it. I think a lot of it, Jason, comes down to, is there malicious intent to deceive, right? And so, again, I have seen sellers who say, here's a new product we're releasing. It's completely different from this other product. It may not even be in the same category. Technically, it's kind of supposed to be in the same category to even be able to do a variation. But if the intent is to launch a new product by essentially what they said, sort of hijacking or borrowing the reviews of the existing ASIN, there's sort of an intent to deceive or to manipulate the algorithm. And I get that. But let me ask you a question, Jason. Say we talked to a chip company a couple months ago. Great chips. I bought them at the local store. They're amazing. Say I've got 5 flavors and they've got 1,000 reviews. And I introduced a 6th flavor. And according to Amazon, that's okay to put a part of a variation. Does the FTC come along and say, wait a second, people don't necessarily like that new flavor. They've never tried it before. You're hijacking the reviews of your other 5 flavors. We're going to fine you. I mean, that's a really fine line that they're playing when it comes to things that Amazon says are okay within their terms of service.
A lot of good stuff to unpack there. I'm reminded of my air hockey table selling days, Shannon, and we would have one style, color. It was really like a wrap, right? Think of a graphic design wrap around these tables. And, one design would do well for 2, 3 years, 4 years, and then styles change. So we would introduce a new color variation. It wasn't a color. It wasn't like a red one and a blue one. It was like one design and then another design. All the bones are the same. It's just the skin on the outside was different. To me, that seems fine. And it's an open question. And in this article that we read from Nutri-Ingredients, one thing stuck out. These are supplements. This is something you're going to ingest into your body, right?
Yeah.
That is supposed to have a given efficacy, certain outcome for shoppers who purchase this and who use it. And so I suspect, and I haven't reached out to the FTC ahead of recording this, but I'm going to reach out to them, to some contacts I have over there this week. And then maybe on a future episode, we'll do just a quick highlight here, Shannon. But I suspect that the reason why the Bountiful was made an example is because of this. You can't have a listing that is reviewed for a certain efficacy or benefit and then add another product with a totally different formulation. It just can't match. I don't know that they have issues with colors or styles as long as the bones are the same, but who knows? The other thing that's really missing from this article, Shannon, is what did Amazon have to say about this? They were conspicuously absent from this article, and they didn't talk about it. It doesn't look like this particular publication asked Amazon for comment, but I always have to go back to Amazon and say, okay, Bountiful just got hit with a $600,000 fine because the Amazon platform allowed them to do something that is actually illegal.
Yeah. Where's
Amazon's culpability in this whole process? And my guess is, and again, I probably won't be able to get an answer from my contacts at the FTC about whether it's happening or not if negotiations are ongoing, but my guess is that Amazon has some amount of responsibility to warn sellers if they cared about sellers like they said that they do at the Accelerate conference, Shannon. They would at least warn sellers and say, hey, this is illegal. You can't do this. Or they would institute some technology that would prevent a seller from doing something that's going to get them a $500,000 fine from the FTC. I would hope that they would do that. And maybe they're working on it under the hood. I hope that's what they're working on it. But no comment from Amazon at all on this.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. That was definitely something I noticed as well. And I have had several clients that I've coached or worked with in the past who got an email notice from Amazon that said, we believe you are violating our parentage or variation terms of service. We've broken the parentage apart. And if you continue to do this, we're actually going to suspend your Seller Central account. Amazon is concerned about the review manipulation by deceiving Amazon customers. I mean, I have to side with Amazon on this one. Sellers who list a product on Amazon that's illegal, that they shouldn't be listed on Amazon, Amazon has some culpability, but at the same time, it's the seller's responsibility to know the laws and abide by that. But it is interesting that, the FTC kind of came over Amazon and usurped their authority and said, even if you didn't break this variation apart, we're going to go ahead and find the seller on top of it. But a case in point, going back to the flavor variations, I did notice that for several of my clients who are in the food industry, if you went to the products on desktop, for example, and I clicked between the different flavors, it would just show that 1,000 reviews for every flavor. But on mobile, if I was in the mobile app and I switched from one flavor to another, it would say, this has 200 reviews. This has 300 reviews. This one has a 3.5-star rating. This has a 4.5-star rating. So there were situations where algorithmically the platform was able to help customers differentiate. Because to be honest, if you've got 5 different flavors, one of them may suck and 5 may be, awesome. And I don't know as a customer, which one I should buy. They sort of all seem the same. So Amazon has the ability to leverage their technology for things where there is personal taste or personal preference that come into play. Maybe the listing as a whole has a certain amount of reviews and ratings that play into the algorithm. But as you click between the different variations, the customer will actually see what customers reviewed that product for, and it will change and shift. And I think, to me, that's a next sort of technological step for Amazon to provide a little transparency to customers so they know what they're getting.
Shannon, what's funny is we've done this for clients in the past where they attach a new variation and, it's legitimate. It's not something crazy like what the Bountiful did, but in the reviews doesn't pull from the parent. And we'll go back to Amazon and ask them. And we filed tickets to say, hey, this is variated under the parent. Every variation should have and show the same number of reviews as the main listing, and they'll do it. And so I think you've stumbled on something that's really important. In reality, Amazon needs to do this. And I don't know if they're still doing this on mobile or it just happened to be one of those where the reviews were separate, Shannon. But if they aren't, I have to believe that they're talking to the FTC about making that happen. Then who cares if it's variated, so long as the reviews for that specific variation are honest. And shoppers can connect the dots for themselves. If they see a blue one has 1,500 ratings and then the red version has 3, well, you could, and it looks like it's the same bones. I think the Amazon shopper's smart enough to know that it's probably the same bones and just a different skin. And I think that's okay. So very, very, very interesting. Look at you, Shannon. I think you just solved this problem. The question is, will Amazon do it? I don't know. When it comes to reviews, they leave a lot to be desired in terms of making those reviews honest, reliable, and shutting down bad behavior. I know they've taken a lot of action. It always seems to fall short.
Well, and that's the other part that it comes out to. Regardless of what Amazon does, regardless of what the FTC does, we have to put bad actors out there as a reason why this is a problem.
Yeah.
And, there are times, Jason, honestly, where I think sometimes it's intentional and done to be manipulative. And there's times where it's completely unintentional. Yeah. Where you go, again, if I have a multi-pack, I've got a 1-pack, a 2-pack, and a 3-pack, for example. And this happened to a client of mine. And what they did was they added a little spoon that would allow you to take the supplement, right? So literally a spoon on top of their 1-pack, 2-pack, 3-pack. Well, they put it in a variation. And Amazon came back and did 2 things. One, they said, well, you can't put a bundle in a variation. But at the same exact time, they said, well, the pricing for the higher priced products, right, like a 3-pack, it can't be more than 3 times of the 1-pack. And so they were sending completely opposing, recommendations and saying, well, we're slapping you for this being a multi-pack. And we're slapping you for this being a bundle, in a variation. It's like, Amazon, it can't be both. And so, it was a situation where we wound up getting help over from our friends over at ecommerce, Chris, to help us resolve that. But it was really challenging. Sometimes people are just creating a variation that makes sense to them, and they didn't know that it was not okay to put this color variation or this style variation under a parentage because in their mind, it made sense.
It's such great stuff, Shannon. And look, again, as we often do on this podcast, this is a PSA. Guys, if you play fast and loose with the rules, you must know now that the FTC is looking to clean up reviews for e-commerce platforms in the United States. So don't do it. I'll give you another example of what not to do. We worked with the teddy bear company once, and instead of having a teddy bear that was a blue and a pink and a gray and a brown and all that, they got a teddy bear and they got it really ranked well. And then they put a rabbit variation and then they put a donkey variation and a lot of others. And Amazon came out and said, you can't do that. We're busting it up and breaking it out. And so we're here, Shannon, to educate, to commiserate, and to talk to our seller community and also interested folks in the Amazon game. And I think it's just the big takeaway here for you all is just don't do this, right? Don't do it. I suspect Amazon will make some changes after some pressure from the FTC, especially if more of these things happen. But, I also want to go back to an email. This is the smoking gun, Shannon. So the FTC cited an example from March 2020. So, okay, that's right at the beginning of the pandemic. The company began selling, this is Bountiful, the company began selling 2 new products, Nature's Bounty Stress Comfort Mood Booster and Nature's Bounty Stress Comfort Peace of Mind Stress Relief Gummies. It requested Amazon combine the new products in a variation relationship with 3 of its established products, all with different formulations. So that's one key. And then you can see this must have been plucked right from an internal email at Bountiful. Unfortunately, people did not love the Stress Comfort products, but sales spiked the second we variated the pages and they continued to grow, according to one internal company email. Boom, smoking gun. you're busted, right? I mean, without a line like that, potentially in the complaint, maybe this doesn't come, maybe this isn't an article that we're talking about on the Day 2 podcast, but you got to be smart, and you got to realize that the FTC is dead serious. I'm actually encouraged by a lot of the action that the FTC has taken, because they've been so passive and on the sideline for so long, and have allowed, in some cases, this mess to happen where people don't really trust reviews right now. And so I'm happy to see them take action. I feel bad for the Bountiful, especially if they just didn't know about it. But you, seller, that you're listening to the Day 2 podcast, if you're a trusted viewer and listener, don't do it. You know what the repercussions are now. You heard it here first.
Jason, the last thing I want to say is, Amazon relies a lot on sellers to report bad actors. Customers don't really do it because, customer goes in and sees a variation. They don't, it's like, what do they know about Amazon's terms of service? It's like they're just looking to buy a product. But the problem is it sort of becomes this epic game of tattletale where you have one brand going after and trying to report another seller's variations, and, maybe they're legitimate, maybe they're not. There's been times where Amazon has broken apart legitimate variations, and we've had to go back and fight with Amazon and say, Amazon, you are wrong. This is a legitimate variation under your own terms of service, under your own guidelines. So part of it is knowing, yes, if you're facing competition, you can report other sellers, and oftentimes you should. Understand also you may be opening a can of worms. So just be prepared to put those worms back in the bottle when they come out. But at some level, it is about taking ownership and responsibility for how you vary your products, and understanding that it is your responsibility to know what's valid within your specific category, what Amazon allows, does not allow, and abide by it to the best of your ability. And that's where our team comes in. We help advise our clients, obviously. And when Amazon breaks stuff, we fix it. And when Amazon tears apart a variation that's legitimate, we go back and we fight it. Because again, we know that sometimes the bot gets it wrong. In fact, I'd say many times the bot gets it wrong. So just because the algorithm comes at you and tears apart a variation and threatens to suspend your account, it doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes, the seller did the right thing and you got to push back. But I agree with you, Jason. I'm glad the FTC is stepping in. I do think product reviews is an issue, and I'm glad they're stepping in that realm, because Amazon is a little bit of like the fox guarding the hen house, because Amazon benefits from review manipulation. I mean, it's like, whether or not you'd want to admit it or not, it's true. And so just like with this Bountiful, just like they said, it spiked this new product. Well, that wouldn't have happened without the variation. So Amazon makes referral money off of all that. They're making advertising dollars off of that. They're making FBA fees off of all that. So
that vendor manager who bought it is getting a rip off of that. Well, not necessarily a rip, but he's getting credit for growing that brand.
Yeah, Amazon wants to maintain their terms of service, but it's hard. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest when they're also responsible for enforcing something that benefits them if they don't catch it every time. And so I think having the FTC step in, take a proactive role, figure out some of this e-commerce stuff that's maybe seemed a little ambiguous, or they sort of stayed out of or been a little passive on the sidelines, I think is really good. I think it's going to be good for sellers. I think it's going to be good for brands. And ultimately, I think it's going to be better for the platforms.
Totally agree. And speaking of making a mistake, it looks like, I had mentioned in the beginning of the episode that I thought that the $600,000 fine was going to the FTC and to its coffers. It looks like this article suggests that the $600,000 is going to be monetary relief for consumers. So now I don't know how the heck that works. I don't know if they divvy that up, but that's actually great news. If that $600,000 is in fact going to go back to folks who bought it under false pretense, then I think that would be good. So I have to correct myself there. But it is interesting. I think the only miss here is, where's Amazon, right? It's like Amazon, the vendor manager, knew that this was the case because we saw the email line from an internal email, and for sure they were having that discussion with their vendor manager. I don't know. Maybe the vendor manager was smart enough to reply, not to reply or to put anything in an email that was discoverable from a lawsuit. Great stuff, Shannon. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for helping us communicate to our viewers and listeners that this is a real deal now. And if you're doing it, stop. You don't want to get that you don't want to get that letter or that phone call from the FTC being on the wrong side of the law. If you're ready to start growing and protecting your brand on Amazon with a team of experienced Amazon operators, you can visit us at day2podcast.com. That's day, the number 2, podcast.com. Lastly, if you know anyone else who would gain value from this podcast, please share it with them. Thank you for listening and happy selling.